Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our AJA Small Parties Forum with the New South Wales lead Senate candidates. It is my pleasure to welcome you all tonight, to everybody who's on the webinar with us, and as Robert mentioned, we are streaming across multiple platforms right now. Tonight we have a fantastic lineup of Lyle Shelton from the Family First Party, Warwick Stacey from the One Nation Party, and Craig Kelly from the Libertarian Party. Thank you very much for our guests for making the time to be here tonight, and thank you to everybody who's joining us this evening. I'll let you know a little bit about the format for this evening. We will go to each of our speakers, starting with Craig, then Lyle, then Warwick, to give a 10-minute presentation about their party themselves, which will then be followed by a Q&A hosted by our CEO, Robert Gregory. If you have any questions, please use the webinar question box, which is located at the bottom of the screen, and write your question in that, a little bit different from our Wednesday night Zoom. And then Robert will be able to pass your questions on to the lead Senate candidates. I'd now like to pass over to our Dr. David Adler, who will give a couple of minutes speech and welcome our lead candidates as well. Thank you, David.
Thank you to Neil, and thank you so much to Craig Kelly, Lyle Shelton, Warwick Stacey for joining us. I just need to make the usual disclaimer that having a forum, having a discussion as a community organisation, we don't endorse any political parties or any candidates formally. The only sort of quasi-exception is that we think the Greens deserve to be put last on every ballot, on every occasion, and other than that, people should make up their own mind as to which of the parties and which of the candidates best reflect their views. Now, I have a little bit of a personal dilemma, and maybe it's one of the issues that will come out in the conversation. I've had the good fortune of meeting and talking to all three of our guests for this evening's forum, and they're all good people. Craig Kelly comes across perhaps as a bit of a down-to-earth person, but let me tell you that he's quite an intellectual, very articulate, and he researches his subject extremely well. Lyle Shelton is known for defending traditional values across a range of things. He gets attacked vehemently because of it, so that if he stands up and says that drag queens are not a good thing for young children, he finds himself in courts and human rights commissions and that sort of thing. And Warwick Stacey has a very strong military background and therefore understands some of the security issues that not only face the Jewish community but face Israel. So the dilemma is this: we have a range of small parties right of centre, and I wonder whether in fact there will be some sort of cooperation, preference, arrangement between the small parties, or in fact, because we do have a number of right of centre small parties, whether in fact it makes the possibility of any of them getting elected more remote. But that's something for people who are in the process. So that's all I want to say. And Neil, if you'd like to introduce the speakers, that would be great.
Well, David, they certainly are great questions, and we'll get round to those in the Q&A section. Another reminder, if you do have a question for a particular candidate, please pop in the Q&A who you would like to direct that question to, or if it's a general question, we'll send that to the panel. Our first speaker for the evening will be Craig Kelly. Former Liberal Party MP for many years, Craig has been outspoken about some of the excesses in the COVID years. He is now the New South Wales lead Senate candidate for the Libertarians. Craig has visited Israel before and has in the past expressed support discussing moving the Australian Embassy in Israel to Jerusalem. We thank you so much for joining us this evening, and please welcome Craig Kelly, everybody.
No, look, thanks everyone. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Thank you, David, for that kind introduction. It's not often I get referred to as an intellectual sort of thing, but I'll take that one and I'll bank it. So thanks very much. Look, also to the other two participants, Lyle and Warwick, both very good men. Both have the highest respect for both of you and the political parties that you represent. Look, just in my 10 minutes, and I think you should ring the buzzer because I normally have a tendency of sort of speaking a bit too long. So put that 10-minute buzzer on me. I'd like to first go from why someone should, at this election, vote for a minor party and why that should be the Libertarian Party. Now, firstly, our country is in a mess. We are actually going backwards. If you look at, there was some data published by the Financial Review only like a few days ago, and it showed with our economy, if you measure it in terms of a cost of living measures and how we are going, whether our incomes are going backwards or forwards, we're the worst performing nation in the world. Our average wealth here is going back 8%, where the rest of the world is going forward. That made us the worst performing nation in the world. Now, that's unfortunately not just, we'd like to blame this all on Albanese, and he is very responsible for it. But unfortunately, in many areas of policy in this country, the Labor and Liberal Party are very much closely related. The policies that they've got, there's not much more than a split match between them. And a lot of the problems that we face now go back to the failures of the previous Labor government. So just go through a few of them. One of the big differences, I think, between the minor parties and the two major parties is in the issue of net zero and the Paris targets. We have both the Labor and the Liberal Party, both of them signed up to the Paris Treaty, and both of them pushing ahead towards net zero. Now, this is having devastating consequences to our economy. China's not doing this. The USA is not doing this. India is not doing this. It is putting a cost burden on our economy. It is forcing up the cost of living for every single Australian. And President Trump, when he won that recent election there in the USA, and he said that he was going to withdraw from the Paris Treaty and basically give lip service to net zero, he gave it to Peter Dutton on a platter that Peter Dutton could have said, look, the circumstances have changed. We now have a circumstance where the US is not following this net zero policy. We're going to reassess it. But no, he went down exactly the same track. So, look, you've asked me that question. Our policies are not going to change at all. So that's where you've got a big difference between these two, the two major parties and the minor parties. The second issue is on immigration. We have seen record immigration in the first 2 years of the Albanese government. The net migration intake under those 2 years was something like it's close to 1 million people. That is more than double that we've ever had before in our nation's history. In fact, if you look at the data between the end of the Second World War and the Sydney Olympics, the net migration rate in this country was around about 80,000 people a year. And that gave us the vibrant multicultural society that I grew up in and I knew that our Australia was. But since then, starting with the Howard government, they kicked the annual migration intake up to over 200,000, around about 230,000 a year. That was under the Howard government. And then we saw the Albanese government kick it up to close to 500,000 a year. So that's given us this massive influx of migrants over the last 12 months, putting strain on all our resources, all our infrastructure. And most of all, it's had the damage of what it has done to house prices and rents. We only saw that gentleman on Q&A last week. Many would have seen it. A good, hard-working, decent Australian, a family man, trying to bring up a wife and a young child in absolute despair about the cost of housing and the cost of rents. That has got nothing to do with they're going about it's a supply issue. We should be building more houses and bits and pieces. All the data shows we are a world record. We hold the record. No one anywhere in the world builds more houses. I think it might be Switzerland was just ahead of us on a per capita basis. No one builds houses more than Australia does per capita. So it's not a supply problem. It is a demand problem. If you put 1 million people extra into your economy in 2 years' time, you simply increase the demand for housing and prices and rents skyrocket. So what we have in this country now is a situation where young Australians that were born in a city, in places like Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, and even Adelaide and Perth, were born in a city, grew up in that city, educated in that city, can no longer afford to buy a house in that city. And when you do that, when you take away the great Australian dream from young Australians, you change the nature of your society. You change the mentality of people if they don't have the opportunity to own part of Australia. So that is the entire rate of excessive rates of migration. And on both the Liberal Party and the Labor Party are both to blame for this. The Labor Party particularly over the last 2 years, but both the Liberal and the Labor Party, their policies are for excessive levels of migration. And the third area where the minor parties differ substantially from the two major Liberal and Labor parties is on the issue of freedom of speech. We saw in that parliament only a short month ago where the Liberal and Labor Party joined hands to push through that hate speech regulation, where now in this country, if you say the wrong thing politically online, you can be arrested and go to jail for 7 years. And we know that this was pushed through on a hoax, pushed through on a criminal conspiracy, guillotined through the parliament with an hour's debate. They had 1 hour debate in the Senate, and we had 76 senators. They had less than a minute each to debate it. That legislation should have never have gone through. The Libertarian Party believe that we should have exactly the same as the US does in our constitution, or a very equivalent, a Bill of Rights to protect freedom of speech, so we cannot have government interference in it. Now, why should it be? Why should you vote for the Libertarian Party? Well, firstly, our preferential voting system gives you the ability to vote for a minor party and then preference the major party of your choice. So I'm sure there's many people out there that would rather see Mr. Albanese and Chris Bowen re-elected for another year, would rather chew their arm off than do that. But look, and so there's no, if you're worried about the Labor Party getting into power, the preferential system gives you 2 bites of the cherry. You can vote for a minor party, and then you can give your preferences to the coalition parties. Now, remember, when it comes to preferences, it is only the people that, only the person marking the pen that gives the preferences. That's how it works. No one else. Parties don't give preferences. They only make recommendations up to the individual. And the final point I'd make, why the Libertarians are ahead of some of the other minor parties, and look, the other minor parties we have very similar policies, and they're all very good people. But I think the Libertarian Party is a true democratic party. We've seen some of the other minor parties are run basically on a dictatorial lines with 1 or 2 people making all the decisions. In the Libertarian Party, that is not the case. We are a completely democratic party run by the members. We now have 10 branches across New South Wales, and two, I'd say, that are sort of like independent branches. So we've got close to 12 branches that have meetings regularly across New South Wales. We've got 10 members elected to local council recently. We've got 1 member in the upper house of New South Wales Parliament. So we are a growing party. We're a strong party. But most of all, I think what distinguishes us from some of those other minor parties is the fact that we are a democratic party run by the members rather than 1 or 2 people and based on personalities. How's my 10 minutes?
Perfect. You must have a built-in clock, Craig.
No, I just the only other thing I'd add is if I've got another couple of seconds left is
sure.
Look, I feel as I've got unfinished business to do in that parliament. I was shocked and horrified what was done during that COVID period, the tyranny, the abuses of human rights that were done. Again, both the Labor and Liberal Party hand in hand doing that together. I understand how Parliament works. I will be ready to go there in day one. I remember when I first got elected, it did take a good 12 or 18 months to understand how it works. On day one, I know exactly how the system works. I know how the Senate system works. I'll be ready to fire exactly on day one if I'm elected. And I think people know from my background exactly where I stand, where I'm coming from, and people will know almost on every issue where I would be before that issue was raised.
Thank you very much, Craig. We'll go to our next speaker for the evening, and it is my pleasure to introduce Lyle Shelton. He has headed the Australian Christian Lobby in the past and has a show on ADH TV. Lyle has been National Director of Family First since 2022 and has been a longtime supporter of Israel and has called for the Albanese government to apologize for its anti-Israel stances. Lyle Shelton is now the New South Wales lead Senate candidate for Family First. Please welcome Lyle.
Thanks very much, Tennille, and thanks very much to you, David, for this opportunity. And Robert, it's a privilege to be addressing this important constituency tonight in the lead up to this election. Also wonderful to be with Craig, who I've had the privilege of meeting on a number of times, and I've been an admirer of his work and his courage. And I do endorse David's comments about Craig's intellect. I think he is someone who does make a very strong, reasoned and considered contribution to the public discourse. I haven't had the privilege of meeting Warwick as yet, but I've been someone who's admired Pauline Hanson's courage in the political discourse, and I think she's been a necessary disruptor. I'll come in a moment, I guess, to why I feel Family First, I guess, has a distinctive place, whilst there is a plethora of centre-right minor parties. But I guess in the lead up to this election, Family First is looking to field 5 Senate candidates across mainland Eastern Australia, Queensland, New South Wales, Victoria, South Australia, and the ACT. And we're looking to be supported by up to 100 lower house candidates. That's still a bit of a moving feast. But Family First is very much committed to seeing the natural family, mum, dad, and the kids, mums and dads in a heterosexual, monogamous, married relationship put back at the centre of public policy in this country. Now, that's something that can't be enforced, but that can be incentivised through public policy. And what we've seen happen over probably the last 50 or so years is both sides of politics have gone away from that as a model. They've given into, I guess, a cultural zeitgeist that has diminished the importance of marriage and family. And we've seen a situation where marriage has been diminished, where we've even now allowed it for same-sex couples. And that, of course, has led to a whole deconstruction of gender, and that's led to all sorts of problems, some of which I'll talk about in a moment. But we believe that we cannot have a strong nation unless we have strong families, based on that definition that I've just put forward. Sadly, most of our politicians can't define a woman, let alone a family. And so we've got a real dilemma in terms of social policy in this nation. We're campaigning at this election on 3 key things. It's not everything, but there's 3 sort of major things that we're wanting to put forward to the electorate. And firstly, that is that cost of living. And I agree with everything Craig has said about net zero. We've identified this for many, many years as something which is just destroying and undermining the economic fabric of our nation needlessly. And so we've got to bring down power prices and the cost of everything by ensuring that we've once again got a reliable and abundant source of electricity generation. And I think we're all on a unity ticket with regard to that. That would solve so much of the problems in this nation. There's no reason this nation cannot be a wealthy nation. We had the cheapest electricity in the OECD. Now we've now got amongst the most expensive. And for no good reason, families are suffering. We want to see housing prices come down. Craig's mentioned immigration. Obviously, that needs to be scaled back massively to affect the demand side of things. But we should also be releasing more land. We live on the most depopulated continent on the planet, apart from Antarctica, but no one wants to live there. Only a government could engineer a land shortage, a housing affordability crisis on a continent where there's more land than anywhere else on the planet. We need to cut red tape. We need to cut the government input costs that go into building a house. There's stories in the Australian this week, up to 47% of the cost of a house is now government charges of one level of government, local government through to federal government. That's got to change. We also want to see income splitting so that the tax system becomes fairer for couples who are raising children, where one parent decides they want to work in the home and look after their children. It's unfair at the moment. The economic modelling done about 10 years ago by Matt Canavan, of all people, showed that there's a $10,000 a year penalty on a couple where one parent works in the home. And generally mothers, if given the choice, will want to stay at home, particularly in those early years where attachment of a child is so important to the mother particularly, and then obviously to the family unit. So these sort of things desperately need to be addressed. They're not really part of the public discourse. We're very concerned about the freedom of religion, freedom of speech debate. Craig's touched on some of those elements. Religious schools have almost been driven out of existence in the term of this parliament by the Australian Law Reform Commission's recommendations that faith-based schools not be allowed to employ staff who share the ethos of their parent community. Anthony Albanese had legislation ready to go. Really, faith-based schools have been under attack ever since same-sex marriage was legislated in 2017. Penny Wong has gone after them, the Greens, ever since then. And there's no doubt, while this issue has come to a stalemate, if there's a minority Greens Labor government, it will be lights out for faith-based schools which want to employ staff who believe there's two genders, who want to teach the Judeo-Christian view of marriage, and even the Muslim view of marriage, where Muslims agree that marriage is one man and one woman. So that's a massive, massive threat. There's the freedom of speech issue. David alluded to my court case. I'm actually in court tomorrow morning in Brisbane for 3 days because drag queens who are offended by me saying they're dangerous role models for children because they promote gender fluid ideology, radical LGBTIQA plus sexual expressionism to little children are dangerous role models, and they are. And I've been dragged through a 5-year legal battle, which has cost around $400,000, and it's still not over. And I'm not the only one. Curly Smith, Sal Grover, many other Australians are being dragged through the court under the so-called hate speech laws at state and federal level, and it's really because we've promoted speech that they hate, and therefore they've weaponised very flawed laws, and there's no one in Australian politics fighting to have these laws repealed. And I think every Australian politician who turns up at an Anzac Day dawn service purporting to honour the Anzac dead for fighting for our freedom of speech should hang their heads in shame, because no one is doing anything about these laws which cause citizens to be dragged through the courts unnecessarily. The third thing we're fighting for, I guess, flows on from some of this, and that's the gender issue. We believe that boys are boys and girls are girls. There are only two genders. We believe that before Donald Trump, and I applaud what he's done. But this has been a big fight. We said this would happen during the 2016-2017 marriage debate. No one believed us. We were told we were scaremongering, and of course it was true. So I think that is starting to they've overreached. It's starting to wind back, but it's taking a long time. And Peter Dutton, unfortunately, as much as I'd love him to be Prime Minister more than Anthony Albanese, is very timid on this. He won't commit on Paris. He won't commit on closing down the child gender clinics. In fact, he's crazily said that his members have a conscience vote on whether there should be an inquiry into what these gender clinics are doing to little children and putting them onto sterilising, puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and in dozens of cases, adolescent girls have had their breasts removed as a result of this so-called gender-affirming care. Peter Dutton really does need to understand what's going on. Donald Trump is very clear about it, and Family First is keen to highlight that. And I know Pauline has been very good on that, and I applaud her for the work she's done. And sadly, it's Liberals in the Senate that have curtailed her efforts there. I guess in terms of differences and distinctions, while I very much admire Craig and One Nation and some of the other players in this space, Family First is pro-life. That is a non-negotiable for us. That comes from our understanding of the Hebrew scriptures, which go back to the Psalms talk about us being fearfully and wonderfully made, knit together in our mother's womb. The idea of the Imago Dei, the Latin for made in the image of God, we believe that is of every human person. Whether you're religious or not, if you go away from that principle that every life has value, then none of us are safe, and it leads to obviously euthanasia and abortion to birth, which is what we've got in this nation in pretty much every state. And with apologies to Kevin Rudd, but climate change isn't the great moral challenge of our time. The right to life of every human creature is, and I guess that is the distinctive of Family First. It's a non-negotiable. We may lose some votes for that, but I think if Australians understood what is really going on in terms of coercion of women to have abortion, late-term abortion, partial birth abortion, babies born alive after abortion and being left to die. This is a pretty grisly underbelly of Australian social policy, which sadly, again, Peter Dutton has told his members, he's put a gag on his parliamentarians and on his candidates from talking about this. So this is a serious issue. So we're fighting for family, faith, freedom and life. We are a small party. We've got 47,000 supporters nationwide. We've got almost 8,000 members that have voluntarily joined the party and about 3,000 donors. We're growing, we're building. We recognise it's going to be difficult for us to get elected at this election, but it's not impossible. And as Craig said, if we as minor parties preference each other well, which I think we will all do, certainly there's no reason why one from amongst our numbers shouldn't be elected in every state. And that will come down to the discipline that our supporters and our voters exercise at the ballot box. So our nation is very much at a crossroad. It is at a crisis. Walked away from fundamental values of marriage, family, and putting the rights of children before the hedonistic desires of adults. That needs to change. the family needs to be favoured in public policy, and we believe there needs to be a political voice for that. And I guess that's the distinctive that we offer, but we'll certainly be working in cooperation with others who share similar values. So again, thank you very much for the opportunity to share, and I look forward to any questions later on.
Thank you very much, Lyle. We'll now go to our final speaker to present for the evening, Warwick Stacey. He has had a long and accomplished military background and has advised and managed the response to dozens of kidnap, extortion, piracy, and related life-threatening incidents. A passionate supporter of the Jewish community and Israel, Warwick is now the New South Wales lead Senate candidate for One Nation. Please give a warm welcome to Warwick Stacey.
Neil, thank you very much. And David, thank you too. And Craig, thank you for your kind words about Lyle and myself. And Lyle, thank you for your kind words about Pauline. I'd say there's no need to apologise to Kevin Rudd for anything. I'd like to start, first of all, by saying that referring to the words of Shakespeare in his play Hamlet, when he had a soldier say, "Something is rotten in the state of Denmark." I will say that something is rotten in the Commonwealth of Australia. There's 4 issues that go directly to the shameful reason we are meeting here tonight, and that shameful reason is to discuss the unleashing in Australia over the past 17 months of open and public expressions of hatred and terrorism against a group of our fellow Australians defined differently only by their faith and culture. Such attacks have never occurred before in the 237-year history of modern Australia. These attacks have been perpetrated against citizens whose forebears have been here over that whole 237-year period. What's more, their contribution to the development of modern Australia has been significantly greater than their numbers would indicate. And these attacks put the lie to the pious platitudes trotted out even recently by Labor ministers Burke and Bowen about the supposed success of Australia's multicultural society. And the lie rests in the facts of the events of the past 17 months and in the refusal of the perpetrators to recognise and accept fellow citizens of a different faith and culture. Those 4 issues are: first, failure of leadership by federal and state governments and by most of our major institutions. Second, failure of education, or rather a failure to educate in our schools and universities. Third, the denigration and attempted destruction from within of our Judeo-Christian Western civilization and values. This civilization and these values made modern Australia and made the whole world modern. And fourth, unwanted, uncontrolled, and mismanaged mass immigration. I hope to elaborate on these issues when the Q&A starts and trust that my comments will show you where One Nation stands with regard to them. I'll add that One Nation stands against extremism, terrorism, and tyranny. I've seen firsthand how extremist ideologies assault common values. I've also seen the significant and sometimes permanent damage caused by extremism to communities and people's lives. I saw this serving in Northern Ireland when bitter religious ideology destroyed peace and harmony. I saw this serving in West Berlin when the spectre of communist aggression was on the rise. I saw this firsthand in Afghanistan as a civilian military consultant and later in kidnap for ransom negotiations with Taliban and ISIS kidnappers and Somali pirates. The thing that all these have in common is that the common values held by most were assaulted by the extreme ideologies of the few. I've also seen firsthand how politicians fail through their own ideology, through their personal and political self-interest, through their cowardly refusal to lead and accept responsibility and accountability while hiding behind unelected bureaucrats who exercise power but lack real-life experience and the specific knowledge necessary to deal properly with critical issues. Such failure of political leadership has been apparent in Australia over the past 17 months, in particular, and over the past 18 years. One Nation offers genuine, principled, disinterested leadership and practical policies in these and related areas. Our policies will prevent and reverse the worst of the excesses inflicted on us over the past 18 years by a revolving door of mostly spineless prime ministers. Their leadership failures and their policies governed by personal and party self-interest rather than by the interests of Australia and Australians have led to the cost of living, the energy and the social cohesion crises we now see impacting Australia. I look forward to engaging with you all tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Warwick. I'll now hand over to our CEO, Robert Gregory. I can see there's some questions being asked in the Q&A box, and we have our own questions to put towards the panelists. So please welcome Robert Gregory.
Thank you, Tennille, and thank you to all our panelists. So just a reminder to everyone, we have received a lot of questions. Please keep sending them through. You can either message them just privately to me or send them through the Q&A section. Some of the questions are for all the panelists and some are for specific ones. To the panelists, if there's a question that's not asked to you, but you want to jump in and get involved, feel free to do that as well. So we'll start with one which is for all the panelists, and maybe we can answer it just in the order that we spoke from the beginning, if that works. So it's on the two-state idea. Both major parties are committed to it, but we've seen that Israelis are against it, Arabs are against it, and President Trump is now proposing new ideas. So are you and your party committed to two-state idea, or are you open-minded to approach new ideas if Australia is called to vote on these issues?
You're still muted. Might need to unmute a couple of people.
Unmuted, there we go.
There we go, that works better, yep.
Look, firstly, just as party principle, the Libertarians' policy on all, when it comes to foreign issues, foreign disputes, foreign wars, is really a non-interventionist position. You know, we are concerned, we don't want to see the Ukraine-Russian war increase. We want to see a peace settlement there. And we all, of course, all of us would like to see some type of a peace between Israel and the Palestinians. But it is very hard to have any type of peace treaty or settlement. When we saw those horrific scenes at that music festival, what was that now, David? Well over 12 months ago, close to 2 years ago now. And to see people taken, just young people just out having a good time, with no religious, completely disengaged from the religious disputes of the world, just having a good time at a rock concert, brutally murdered and raped and taken hostage. That is one of the most barbaric things that I've seen. It takes us back to it's almost to medieval times of the one human could do that to another. So absolutely, look, we're more than willing to listen to new solutions. President Trump's come in there with a new broom, and if he can come up with a solution that will come up with some lasting peace settlement in the Middle East between Israel and the Palestinians, of course, I think everyone would be 100% behind it.
Like me to go now, Robert?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Craig.
Yeah, no, thanks, Craig. Thanks, Robert. Look, I can't see that a two-state solution is tenable, and we wouldn't support that. It's quite obvious that Gaza and even the West Bank, whatever governance exists, is completely dysfunctional, and it's of people who think that Israel shouldn't exist deep down, and that view seems to be prevalent amongst the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank. So you can't have a two-state solution where one potential state thinks the other one should not exist at all. And I guess the thing that's really bothered me enormously, particularly since October 7, is what's been illuminated from the Muslim community in Western Sydney, that they obviously seem to be on the side of those who want Israel to be destroyed. There's been, to my knowledge, no condemnation at all of Hamas's actions on October 7. And unfortunately, they've been supporting groups like Hizb al-Tahrir. These sort of operatives have been involved in agitating for political lobbying here in this nation. we've seen Muslims from Australia go and attend funerals of Hezbollah terrorists in Lebanon. So, look, under these circumstances where both obviously Hamas is not an option for governing any future state, the Palestinian Authority is completely dysfunctional, and it seems like a large part of the so-called moderate Muslim world, including here in Western Sydney, is of the view that the state of Israel doesn't have the right to exist, that somehow this river to the sea mantra must become more than a mantra. So there's no way that a two-state solution is tenable at all, and another solution's got to be found. And I think President Trump's vision of a Riviera on the Mediterranean is certainly much better than the alternatives offered by the Arab world at the moment.
Thank you, Lyle. Warwick, you're...
Am I muted or?
No,
No,
you're right.
no.
You're right.
Good, thank you, Robert. Well, first of all, the 3 Israeli prime ministers have already offered a two-state solution to the leaders of the Palestinians, and they have been rejected by the Palestinians. Secondly, Ariel Sharon created the two-state solution with his unilateral withdrawal of all Israeli military and all Israeli civilian settlers in Gaza in 2005. And Gaza had the opportunity to create its own state. According to economists and various other pundits around the world, Gaza has resources and the ability to become perhaps the Singapore of the Middle East or similar. But they rejected that. They destroyed the Israeli infrastructure that the Israelis left behind and immediately started rocketing Israel. And secondly, thirdly, the truce that was effected between Israel and Hamas was broken on October 7, 2023 by Hamas when they carried out their satanic attack on southern Israel. So Israel has established diplomatic relations with various Arab nations. It's established peace between itself and Egypt and Jordan. And really, until the Palestinians accept the reality of the existence of Israel, it's very unlikely that there will be a two-state solution. Secondly, or allied to that, is the fact that by Hamas's own charter and Hezbollah, its own claims and so on, and this genocidal from the river to the sea, there is obviously an indication on the part of the Palestinians that there is only going to be a one-state solution in the Middle East, and that is to be a Palestinian state engulfing what is now Israel. So those are the realities that Israel and the rest of the world faces on the ground. I think Lyle mentioned something about President Trump's plan or talks about Gaza. And I think that to date, nothing has worked. Everything that the great powers have attempted, everything that Israel has offered has ended in complete failure and a complete resistance on the part of the Palestinians to engage and to accept the existence of Israel. With regards, so that could be something that could work. So I think something has to be different, and Trump has certainly offered something different. With regard to One Nation and to myself, we don't have a specific policy yet on Israel. We do support what was the bipartisan situation in Australia until that was broken deliberately for political reasons by Prime Minister Albanese and his Foreign Minister Penny Wong, and voting against or voting for Palestinian nationhood and so on in the UN and against against Israel. This was a bipartisan policy that had held up and had proven basically effective. But otherwise, I would say for myself, position to take is one of neutrality. It is up to the people in the Middle East to work this out, and we in Australia should allow that to happen. We support it when we can and where we can, but otherwise, What happens there, other than the results of what occurs here, is something that that is outside Australia's ability to control and ability to influence. No matter how much Penny Wong thinks she might do that by stamping her feet, or Albanese might do so by uttering his mealy-mouthed weasel words, trying to the Western suburbs and the Jewish community.
Thanks, Warwick. All right, now we've got a question directed towards Lyle. We've had thousands of Gazans are being brought here by the Albanese government. They're being given visas. Does Family First have a policy towards this? And I'll encourage brevity in the answers where possible, and anyone else can jump in as well afterwards.
Yeah, thanks, Robert, and thanks for the question. Yes, we do have a policy around this. We have called for a pause on all Muslim immigration into Australia. Particularly, as I alluded to earlier, we're seeing our Muslim leaders here in Western Sydney openly supporting prescribed terrorist organisations like Hizb al-Tahrir and Hezbollah. I think it's pretty obvious. We've seen some of these operatives even being allowed to speak on the steps of Lakemba Mosque. So this sort of collaboration with terrorism by Australian Muslim leaders is deeply alarming to us, and I'm sure the others would agree with this. But we think we've got to have an immediate pause on Muslim immigration until we can ascertain where the Muslim leaders in Australia actually stand and get some clarity, because there hasn't been any condemnation of the fellow who said he was elated and happy and smiling that October 7 occurred. There's been no criticism of the despicable acts on the steps of the Opera House, where the phrase "gas the Jews" was used. I don't care what the police say. I think that's been a fabrication. So this has been able to run for way too long. So we've got to pause Muslim immigration. We certainly shouldn't be letting people from Gaza in, where the majority of the population supports what happened on October 7. And we've all seen the video of them, elatedly screaming Allah Akbar as the hostages were paraded through the streets of Gaza in the wake of October 7. I mean, this is horrific stuff. So I've gone on too long. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, Lyle. Unless anyone Warwick wants to say something, sure.
Yeah, certainly. One Nation's position on this is that we will not accept any immigration or any refugees from any extremist nation. And one can say, as Lyle has just pointed out, that Gaza is an extremist nation. More than 70% of the population supported what happened on October 7 in southern Israel, and we've seen the scenes of the treatment of the Israeli hostages when they were taken into Israel, and so on. And so, why Albanese and Wong have accepted 3,000 Gazan refugees is beyond comprehension. Egypt won't accept them. Their fellow Muslim brothers, Jordan won't accept them. No other Muslim nation has put their hand up to accept them. And I don't think any other Western nation has put their hand up to accept them. So this seems to be politics on the run by Albanese to appease the western suburbs of Sydney and the relevant suburbs in Melbourne as well. So that is our position. No immigration, no refugees from extremist nations.
Thank you, Warwick. Now, a question for Craig. The Libertarians have come out against the hate speech laws, as you mentioned, and I'll say so has AJA as well. But how can we know that the Libertarians will take anti-Semitism seriously, or are there any policies or anything that you would do differently to combat what's going on?
Yeah, okay. Firstly, on the hate speech legislation, absolutely 100% we oppose it. When you look at that detail, the detail of that legislation, it is an absolute abomination. It has changed a couple of things. It changed both premise. You can now go to jail. No one wants to see hate speech, and some hate speech is despicable. And we already have laws against inciting violence, deliberate inciting violence. But this new legislation allows you to be arrested and go to jail, even if you are acting and speaking in good faith. It goes across against the perception of what a good person, so-called a reasonable person, of one of the so-called protected groups, which include intersex status, gender ideology, and also political opinion. And if you're in one of those groups and you feel that something that somebody said you feel apprehension that you may have force used against you with a very wide definition of force. It's not physical violence, it is just force, whatever that means. You can now go to jail for 5 years. This is completely abhorrent to anyone that values free speech. And I truly believe that the best way to attack us, the anti-Semitic, what we are seeing throughout our country in some ways, is not laws that sort of like force it under the carpet and brush it under the carpet or only fester. Is to bring those people out into the open, let them say what they think in the open, let us see exactly what these people think, and defeat their ideas with better ideas, with more open free speech. We should be mocking people. They talked about we've got a law that bans certain symbols and bans the Nazi symbol. Well, if you do that, all you are doing is making a martyr of someone. To me, the best way, anyone that sort of like wants to go around with draw graffiti on things or promote the swastika, they should be mocked and laughed at. That is how we defeat that ideology, not just by trying to make it illegal. As I said, history shows when you make these things illegal, when you make the speech illegal, you make martyrs of people and you actually attract people to these crazy causes. And we're far, far better to have open dialogue and more free speech to defeat these ideas.
Thank you, Craig. Now, a question for Warwick. We've seen the Albanese government has doubled funding for UNRWA. It's giving a lot of foreign aid to extremist groups. What would you do differently about that? Would you stop that? Does One Nation have a policy regarding foreign aid?
Indeed, One Nation does have policies regarding this. One of our policies is to withdraw from the United Nations, to withdraw from the International Criminal Court, to withdraw from the various supranational organizations that are infringing on our own sovereignty. With regard to UNRWA, it's been well documented that UNRWA has supported Hamas and has supported terrorist activities. And so we certainly feel that is funding that should not go to UNRWA, it should not go to Hamas, should not go to terrorist organizations, and that funding should be used for Australians and to meet Australian needs. So we are completely against that.
Now there's a question for everyone. Thanks for that, Warwick. So we touched on earlier about how a lot of people don't want the Albanese government re-elected. They don't want Greens, Teals. So what can you commit, or what can your party commit to, whether it's preferencing each other or to making sure that that there's a positive result for right of centre politics? Maybe we'll do it in the order as well that we started with.
Okay, I'll jump in there first. Firstly, we'll make it very clear there's no ambiguity about this. Who will be recommending our preferences to? We'll be recommending, when it comes to preferencing, to put Labor ahead of the Greens, but put the Greens last, Labor and the Teal Party, or the Teals, so-called Teal Independents, to put them last. Right? If there is if we do get someone elected to the House of Representatives, which is an unlikely situation, they would be supporting Peter Dutton to form a government. I think it's very important that all parties going to this election, when there's a likelihood of a hung parliament, that every party sets out, if their candidates are successful, where their vote will go in a hung parliament. Now, we're not seeing that for any of the Teals. The Teals are the great ones of transparency and integrity and honesty in politics. If you want transparency and honesty and integrity in politics, set out before people vote for you where your vote will go in a hung parliament. And what we've done here in the Senate in New South Wales, we've put together a joint coalition ticket. So we'll be running a Freedom Coalition, an Australia First ticket with Gerard Rennick's People's First Party and the Heart Party that will formerly be Informed Medical Options Party. So we'll be running a triple ticket in the Senate. It'll be Libertarians, Gerard Rennick's People First and the Heart Party. We put a couple of proposals forward to the other parties to come and join us, because we believe that the best way to get someone from the minor parties elected is to all unite in the Senate. We've had partial success in that. And I said in New South Wales, it will be a joint ticket, Libertarians, Gerard Rennick's People's First and the Heart Party.
Thank you, Craig.
Yeah, thanks, Craig. Similarly, we'll be supporting people who share similar values to us, and I think you can tell by the tenor of our conversation today that obviously there's a lot of commonality and goodwill between Family First and Libertarians, well, certainly Craig and Warwick. And so we've certainly had discussions informally as well, with particularly Jared Rennick. We'll certainly be looking to support him where we can as well. You will hear the Liberal Party in particular say that a vote for a minor party is a wasted vote. That is actually not true. It's a more powerful vote. If you vote for one of our parties, you're sending a strong message to the coalition that they are not doing the job on net zero, on gender, on family values in our case, which they're not. And obviously Labor, the Greens and the Teals, they're even more hostile than the so-called moderate wing of the Liberal Party is to those values that I just enunciated. So as Craig said earlier, it's up to individuals, voters, to allocate their preferences. Family First will make recommendations that'll be very clear and transparent, which will favour other like-minded minor party candidates, and we will be favouring a Dutton government. Despite, obviously our criticism of the coalition, they will be certainly better by a much greater margin than a Greens Labor government. So that's what you'll expect to see from us.
Thank you, Lyle.
Certainly, as Lyle has said, minor parties are not a wasted vote. And I think the fact that the major parties are saying that shows the fear that they have about the minor parties. First, One Nation believes that the voters own their preferences, so it is up to them to preference as they wish. However, we're going to recommend that from the bottom, we put Greens at the bottom, we'll put Teals at the bottom with the Greens, and that's because the Teals have voted with the Greens more than 70% of the time in Parliament. So they are, yes, they are Teals. They are light green, if you like. And then Labor and Liberals right at the bottom of the ticket. And then the minor parties, according to the voters' wishes, and again according to the way we will recommend that they will vote in the various electorates and also in the Senate. Then that will be how we will proceed with the preferences. But Labor, Greens, Teals, and the Liberals at the bottom of the ticket.
Thank you, Warwick. Well, I think, yeah, those three answers will be quite reassuring to a lot of people. I think we've just got time for one more question, which will be for all panelists. And when you give your answer to this specific question, you can also give a few closing remarks if there's anything else you want to share. So one of the big issues for the Jewish community has been bias in the ABC. It's been incredibly biased against our community, against Israel. It's not the only issue with ABC. There's a lot of other complaints against ABC. Does your party or yourself, do you have a policy to privatize the ABC, close it, take any measures against it? And maybe we will start in the same order we've gone in.
Okay, yeah, I started to laugh with that. That's one thing that I've been fighting against the ABC for many years, and the misinformation that they've been putting out. Okay, here's my idea for the ABC. Firstly, we defund it, and then what we do, we actually give it to all the current employees of the ABC. We give them one share for each year of employment that they've been in there. And we set up this wonderful workers cooperative, and they can be as left-wing and put as much propaganda out as they like. And then the Commonwealth maintains the fixed assets, and they lease it to this new ABC company of all the fixed assets. And these people can sell their shares. They can run it however they want to. And we can also have on your tax return a little box down the bottom where you can give voluntary funding. So if you on your tax return, if you want to make it, if you love your ABC and you think it should be funded by the government, you can write an amount in of how much extra tax you want to pay to give that money as a donation to run the ABC. But compulsory money from the taxpayers, a complete duck egg.
Thank you, Craig.
Yeah, look, I agree with Craig. The ABC should be funded. It's got a $1.3 billion a year budget. It's a bloated bureaucracy. It is a misinformation machine. I grew up in rural and regional Queensland, where the ABC was revered and did a terrific community service. I would keep a regional and rural ABC. but I'd certainly scale back the metropolitan aspects of it. I think much of its work is now redundant, and certainly it is completely biased, so it needs to be defunded.
Thank you, Lyle.
And okay, first of all, One Nation does not have a policy on the ABC, and certainly not for the moment. However, I will add that One Nation is the only truly conservative party in Australia, and the ABC does not have a single conservative commentator in any of its services. One Nation, we're concentrating on cost of living, the cost of living crisis. We're concentrating on the housing affordability crisis. We're concentrating on immigration, and we're concentrating on crime for this election. But let me say that Pauline Hanson, One Nation, Senator Roberts, Pauline Hanson, all One Nation candidates are keeping a close eye on the ABC.
Thank you. For our final question for the night, I'd like to ask each of the candidates for your closing remarks, but also if there are people watching live in our audience, how can they further support what you're doing and follow your journey? And how can they be more involved if they so wish? We'll start with Craig, please.
Yeah, first, thanks for the opportunity, and thank you for everyone for listening in. This is truly going to be an important and historic election. The fact that Lyle said earlier that the major parties are saying vote for the minor parties is a waste of time. It is the exact opposite. If you vote for one of the minor parties and then you can preference the major parties in your view, you are effectively giving yourself two votes. You're getting two bites at the cherry, and you are sending a real message that the past 15, 20 years governance of this country of both the major parties has not been good enough. We've got, many people I know probably listening to this might be more slightly in line, want to vote with the coalition. But the reality is that coalition has let you down. That Liberal Party has let you down. It is not the strong Liberal Party that we knew under Mr. Howard, and also in the early days of Tony Abbott. It is no longer that strong party with strong values. It is wishy-washy and it is weak. And the only way that can be fixed for the best interest of this country is a vote at this coming election for one of the minor parties. And I hope that when you look at the different minor parties, you consider the Libertarian Party. Of course, if you want to look at that, you can follow me. Most of my work is on Twitter, on X handle, just Craig Kelly. Of course, all the New South Wales Libertarians, just Google that and you can see our website there with the details of all our policies set out in great detail.
Thank you so much, Craig. We'll go to Lyle. Oh, let me just make sure you're unmuted.
Yeah, my bad. Can you hear me now?
Yes, perfect.
Yeah. Look, Australia faces a crisis of leadership at the moment. We've talked about this, but we've got both sides of politics, Labor and Liberal, going into this election. Both pledged to the Paris Climate Accords, both pledged to net zero, both wishy-washy on this incredibly important issue of children's gender and the crisis that's going on in terms of the confusion and the damage that's being done to children as a result of this this ideology and just the weakness there. From both sides of politics. We need some disruption in Australian politics. I admire the policies of Donald Trump. I sometimes wonder about his methods and perhaps his narcissism. I don't want to be unkind to the man, but I think there is a way that we could show strong leadership in this nation, perhaps without so much narcissism and belittling our opponents, but just being really, really clear on our policies. We could be a country that is wealthy and prosperous if we unleash our energy. We have coal, we've got gas, we've got uranium, we've got abundant land. The only reason we are suffering economically is because politicians have made it so. And we need people to vote for the vision that those of us on the centre right and the minor parties have to disrupt the status quo that both sides of politics have taken us down. And they've both taken us down this path. And obviously, I would encourage a vote for Family First as number one, because I think even beyond, I guess, the areas of commonality tonight, we do need to face up to the fact that we've let ourselves down as a nation by dropping the ball on marriage and family. And none of us pretend to have a perfect family or perfect marriages. So to something better, because there's no doubt that strong families make strong nations, and they become the basis of strong communities and strong towns and strong cities. And so we've got to get back to the basics there in terms of putting family policy first, and particularly the ability of young couples to buy a home so that they can found and form their own families, and economics should not dictate against that. We need courage in our political leadership. There's a lack of courage, and I think that's something which we in Family First and those of us on the minor party centre right offer. So I'd encourage people to do something a bit radical this election, to disrupt the status quo, disrupt what essentially is a uniparty in this nation, and vote for a party like Family First or my other colleagues here tonight. If you want to follow our work or learn more about what we're doing, you can go to familyfirstparty.org.au, familyfirstparty.org.au. You can follow me on X and Facebook, and I would certainly love you to get involved if you so desire. So thanks again for this opportunity. It's been a great privilege.
Thank you so much, Lyle. Warwick, please.
Thank you, Tenniel. Well, first of all, Anthony Albanese, when he became Prime Minister, said he was here to change the country, and he's certainly done that. This is a critical election, and Albanese and the Greens are destroying our economy. They are destroying our social cohesion. They are destroying our standard of living. They are destroying our prosperity. They're doing everything they can to destroy our manufacturing base and so on. And they've succeeded. So if one nation has enough senators in the upper house and members in the lower house, we will put a chokehold. If Albanese is returned with a Greens minority government, we'll put a chokehold on any of his divisive and destructive legislation that he tries to push through the Senate. We will stop it. If Dutton manages to form a coalition government, then we will put spine.
Oh, Warwick's just dropped out. Okay. Well, that's one way to exit an event, I guess, have the internet drop out. Look, I would just like to thank everyone for coming along this evening, whether you're watching directly on the Zoom or on Facebook or YouTube. The event is recorded, and we will send out a video in our email as well. Thank you so much to Craig Kelly, Lyle Shelton, and Warwick Stacey, who's dropped out. But as I said at the beginning, I think they're all very, very good people, and I hope that they'll find some way of cooperating. This is certainly a monumental election from a Jewish community point of view. Someone said that the Jewish community began with the First Fleet, and I might add, not as crew, and has made a substantial contribution to Australia entirely through the history. But I have never in my lifetime seen a more hostile government to our community and to those that have an interest in Israel. So it is a very significant election, and we are hoping for better days, and we need good people in Parliament to bring those better days. So thank you very much, everyone, for participating or watching, and good night to all.